Hi everyone, this is Andrei Roman. I'm the CEO of AtlasIntel, and I'm very happy to introduce to you today to a new edition of Atlas Deep Dive. We will be talking about the latest poll release for the US election that shows very interesting, actually it shows a stable tendency, but that in and of itself is quite interesting, and we will analyze that for you. Joining me, I have Pedro Azevedo. He's our chief specialist for the US election. He heads all of our US coverage. How are you, Pedro?
Hi, Andrei. I'm fine. Happy to be here.
And so that we jump right in, let's go to the numbers. We have just published a poll that looks at the evolution of the US race in the head-to-head scenario between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. We basically have the same data we were looking at back in July when Kamala had just jumped into the race. Trump appears 2.9 points ahead of Kamala at 50.9% and Kamala at 48%. So much has happened since Kamala joined the race. And in the numbers, it seems like really nothing has happened. And remember that this is a poll that was collected after the debate, a debate that Kamala Harris won pretty convincingly, according to our own data. We have numbers on that as well, together with what we're showing here. So what do you think, Pedro? Were you expecting these numbers before we released them? What would you say?
Well, I was certainly not expecting them, Andrei. I think, like you said, it's pretty remarkable in itself that there has been barely any shift at all, right?
Right.
We see a small fluctuation for Trump here, but well within the margin of error, right? So, just 0.8 percentage point. And so, like you said, I mean, so much has happened between then and now. We had a massive seeming surge of enthusiasm for Kamala, right? All across, from her nomination to her choosing Waltz as VP to the Democratic National Convention, which was basically a big party for the Democrats. And yet we see no real impact here.
It's important to remember that before Kamala joined the race, Biden was 6 points behind Trump in the latest public poll we had. And in our private polling, he had even less. So the difference came up to 8 percentage points at the peak of Trump versus Biden. So even as, we're looking at a result here that is not as exciting for Kamala as one would have thought, based on other polls. I think ours has Trump quite a bit ahead, in comparison to others. But it's important to remember that the scenario has changed compared to when Biden was a candidate. Kamala does perform way better. And this difference of 3 percentage points, means that the race is still competitive. And it wasn't
tie,
competitive.
Right? It's a statistical tie, considering our margin of error.
It's a statistical tie, considering the national scenario, the national vote, in terms of the popular vote. I wouldn't say it's a tie when you convert this to what this means in swing states. That's means that
problem.
In the swing states, Trump probably has, a systematic advantage. And when that systematic advantage comes to fruition, if it comes to fruition, that means that the likelihood, based on these numbers, that he would win the election is considerably greater than 50% today, based on the numbers we have. Still, it's not the same. It's not the same scenario we had with Biden, and it's important to note that Kamala has changed the race in a really important, impactful way. Now, I would also say, though, that perhaps the expectations were just too high. I mean, if you have a candidate that's a Democratic candidate that's 8 points behind, or 6 points behind, right? You replace him. You have another candidate that is considerably, more energetic, great crowd appeal, very good performance overall, in terms of the way Kamala both designed the strategy of her appearances and also in terms of her just personal charisma and performance, you know, exciting the Democratic base. But still, I mean, there is a limit to how much that can change things, right? So in a polarized context, you know, from 8 to 3 percentage points difference, that's 5% of the U.S. electorate that switched, right? And
it's impressive,
and that's quite
by itself,
and that's quite impressive. And we'll see, you know, whether there is a new wave. I would say that, you know, there is a wave of momentum for Kamala that is embedded in these numbers. Mm-hmm. It means that momentum appears to have stalled for now. But you may have another wave of momentum. And I guess we'll have to see what could generate, what is the fact that could generate that wave of momentum. It would have appeared that the debate perhaps could have done that. And what did you think about the debate? Well, Kamala probably won the debate, but would it have been reasonable to expect that just based on the debate, we would see a new wave of momentum for her?
Well, I would say, Andrei, that the debate by itself would probably not give her that, right? Just the impact of people watching the debate and going, oh, wow, Kamala is amazing. That's not going to by itself propel her forward, right? But I feel, and I mean, like we see here, you know, our poll was collected after the debate, and the difference between her and Trump, the margin between her and Trump is still pretty much the same. But what I would say is that she probably has a good 1 or 2 weeks now in which to sort of try to propel her message, riding on sort of the victory in the debate, and in, you know, because the repercussions of the debate, you get good press, you get memes and, you know, videos in social media, either of her answers in the debate where she performed really well, I think, in abortion, on the issue of January 6th, or memes about Trump, or the times when he slipped up, or the times when he went on sort of rants. So I think what the debate does is it creates a good environment for her, but she still has to do the work to make use of that environment to propel herself forward. So the debate by itself is not decisive, but maybe these next few weeks she can use that to try to consolidate herself.
I think one reason, perhaps that's a bit overlooked, that also explains why Trump is resilient, even as Kamala has performed well, even as everyone talks about Kamala, even as Kamala receives huge endorsements like Taylor Swift. We have a new scenario, though, in terms of the candidates. The only third way candidate that was really relevant in this race was Robert F. Kennedy. And when we look to this other question here, when we actually measure vote intention for third-party candidates, what we see is that virtually there's no third-party candidate left. And it's important to remember that Kennedy endorsed Trump. And if you look at how the numbers add up, you know, I think that may also explain a bit of the cushion that Trump has with Kamala. So I think Kamala is pretty much where she was before, on that wave of enthusiasm. I think what's helping Trump a bit is the Robert F. Kennedy effect. And I think many people forget to pretty much take that into account at this point. Also because everything moves so fast in this race, people kind of forget about, you know, the attack, the fact that Trump was almost assassinated. And I think we're moving so fast with the analysis here that the Robert F. Kennedy endorsement was pretty much overlooked in terms of analyzing poll data. But it is very relevant. We're talking about
the end of the Democratic convention, right? So, you know, everyone was covering Kamala, and then Kennedy drops out. So it's all just a big
And we're talking about a candidate that polled as much as 15% or even more in other polls. But in ours, he polled as much as 15%. At the end, you know, he was on a downward slope. He was approaching 5% in our last estimates. But that in and of itself, you have a candidate that scores 5%. Let's say he only had that at the end. If you add, most of that to Trump, that explains pretty much the numbers we have here.
Especially since the poll we did in June, which was our last one with Biden, he was at around, like you said, 10%, a bit above that maybe. And then the first one we did with Kamala a month later, he was down to 5%, and Kamala was, doing a lot better than Biden. So everyone that would sort of lean towards the Democrats but didn't really like Biden and was considering Kennedy as a protest option, they sort of left him when Kamala went into...
Do you think
So I think that base that remained for Kennedy, that those 5% that were still there, that was probably a lot of people who would either not vote at all, but also people who would, if Kennedy was not in the race, vote for Trump. So Kennedy drops out, these people flock to Trump.
Do you think the Democrats could have managed the Kennedy situation better? In the sense that, there is clearly quite a bit of antagonism to his figure within the progressive base, even in his own family. Everything is so polarized that, I think it would have been hard to just, embrace or talk really nicely about Robert F. Kennedy if you're Kamala Harris, right? But the way it happened, though, it felt as if he was completely rejected and, disregarded and overlooked. And I think some of his voters could say that he was disrespected. And he made a point about, arguing he was sabotaged during the entire process, that first he could not register his name on the ballots. Now he cannot take his name out. So there appears to be a systematic, use of the judicial apparatus in the case of the Democrats to sabotage Robert F. Kennedy's chances. And that was not what, at the end at least, Kennedy was saying about Trump. So do you think that makes a difference? That those 15% of the voters that were actually considering voting for Robert F. Kennedy, now that he's supporting Trump, how do you think this works out?
I think these voters, the voters that believe there is a judicial conspiracy against Kennedy, or against Trump, that's a lot of them, but
sure.
But I think these voters would have never gone for the Democrats. I don't think the Democrats could have done something different to pull these guys in, because these are the voters that came from, Kennedy has been a long time denier of the efficiency of vaccines, for example, and that attracted a lot of people to him. It's been a popular conspiracy theory these days. So I think these voters would... these voters were either not going to vote at all, right? Exactly the kind of voter that would go, oh, the system is rigged anyway. I'm going to vote for Kennedy because he is telling everyone how the system is rigged and how the two parties are rigging the system to their benefit. Or they were going to vote for Trump, right? In adjacency to that sort of the conspiracy mindset. And I think these specific kind of voters that adhere to this mindset specifically, I don't think there's any way the Democrats could have won them over, because these guys are against the establishment and the Democrats are the image of the establishment, right? It's like we saw.
They're basically saying that once you were a voter that had shifted to Kennedy, that was a voter that had already been lost by the Democrats. So at the end, it doesn't really make so much of a difference. But
well, like I said, I think just like I said, Kennedy went from around 10% in our last poll with Biden to 5% in our first poll with Kamala. So I think the voters who would have leaned toward the Democrats but still saw Kennedy as a viable protest candidate or something, these guys went to the Democrats when Kamala came in. I think whoever was left there were mostly voters that prefer this third-party situation or that would lean towards Trump. So I think by this time, there wasn't many left that the Democrats could have won.
I agree. at the same time, we're talking about differences that are so small in terms of the percentages. So we're talking about the 2.9 percentage difference between Trump and Harris. That I think it does, at the end of the day, explain part of this dynamic where Trump, even as he doesn't perform great, everyone's recognizing this is not the best moment of his campaign, right? And it has been a great momentum for Kamala. But I think it does help explain how he is able to stabilize public support and stabilize his polling numbers against Kamala, against her momentum. So I think there is some structural impact there.
For sure.
Of what happens with Kennedy. And a different thing that I think we should be bringing up here is this. So you look at the debate, and Kamala performs great. You look at the poll, though, and what are the greatest challenges that are on the mind of the U.S. electorate today? There are three big ones at the head of the list. Inflation and cost of living, 55%. The U.S. economy and job market, 55%. Immigration, 50%. The first topic that is great for Kamala, that is perhaps her strongest, challenges to reproductive rights, 27%. So, way below the top three. And then safeguarding democracy at 25%. It appears to me that, this is one of the reasons for which you can watch the debate. Everyone will agree, or most people will agree, that Kamala had a strong debate. And yet it may still not create such a huge impact in terms of how people adhere to the two candidates, because the topics that are most salient today are those that are actually very strong for Trump, the top three. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and I think especially talking about the debate, the question that most touched on the economy was the first one, which was right out of the gate when Trump was still confident and Kamala seemed a bit nervous. And so, especially if we're talking about the debate, I think this was maybe one of her worst performances, especially in relation to Trump, where he was still, in control.
During this debate.
Yes. But in general, that's a very hard perception to shake, because the problem with especially in a country that's not as used to inflation as the United States, right? Us here in Brazil, we know how inflation feels like.
And it does appear that the numbers are getting worse, right? So if you're looking at the news on the economy, over the past 2 weeks, they haven't been great, right? Job numbers came way below expectations. And there appears to be some sort of threat among the American public that, everything appears to be under control, even in the context of high inflation. But I don't think people are convinced that this is sustainable. And I don't think they're convinced this is sustainable, in part because this administration, right, has not really had great, it hasn't really translated good performance on the economy overall, even as it's getting worse now. It hasn't really capitalized on those numbers to explain that it was democratic or progressive policies that were responsible for that somehow. Right? I don't think people are really having an appreciation of that. Amongst economists, for example, many credit, for example, this huge wave of migration, all right, with actually helping the economy. Because if migration wouldn't have happened in these huge numbers, perhaps inflation would have been even greater. Perhaps you would have had all sorts of issues in terms of the labor market that actually undocumented migrants somehow were able to contribute. That is quite polemic for those conservatives that are watching this. They all think this is anathema. How could an economist believe that is the case? But if you think about the impacts of immigration in the U.S., they're very complex because of the sheer scale of how many people arrive. And many of the people that arrive in the U.S. Will, end up in productive, in productive jobs, and they will be getting paid way below, what U.S. workers will. Mm-hmm. And that will somehow create some more dynamism in terms of what businesses that rely on that very cheap labor are able to do. So there is, in terms of economic theory, quite, good reason to believe that if you're, for example, to cut completely the migration flows from the southern border, that could actually impact inflation negatively, and that could actually impact the economy in a negative way going forward. Now, that is not really how the debate in the U.S. is shaped, though. And then the way the debate is shaped is that what do people actually believe? That the economy is not great because the inflation, in particular, is out of any sort of reasonable expectation, and that as well, immigration is a crisis.
Yeah,
it's a public safety crisis, and it's a crisis perhaps in a societal way, even in terms of U.S. democracy, culture, identity, and so forth.
Yeah,
and as long as these are the issues, right? Even as Kamala does perform great in any debate, it's hard for her to tear apart at this relative majority that Trump has. We're looking at these numbers, 55, 55, 50. So it's a majority that recognizes these are important issues.
Yeah, and like you say, I think it's no coincidence that these three issues are there sort of jumbled up at the top with a majority of the American people saying these are the greatest challenges the United States faces today. Because from a political and from the debate and narrative standpoint, I think they feed into each other, right? You go to the supermarket, you go to get gas for your car, and you find out that what you used to pay can't cover what you want to buy anymore. Your buying power is sort of reducing. In the meantime, you see these news about unprecedented levels of immigrants crossing the border, and it's easy from a narrative standpoint to sort of make that jump, right? That, oh, my life is getting worse, the cost of living is rising, and I can't afford what I used to anymore, and there are all these other people here, and make that jump that this is a problem, that these two are connected, right, in the mind of the voter, which is, like you said, very problematic for Kamala and for the Democrats in general, because these are seen as responsibilities of the Biden administration, and a tough perception to shake for Kamala.
Yeah, one interesting thing when I look at undecided voters, we look at their profile. We see that many of them are actually, in terms of demographics, somehow closer to Kamala. So we're talking mostly about, Latinos. We're talking about lots of blacks. We're talking about, younger voters. These are demographics that are generally associated with the Dems and not with the Republicans. And yet, when you try to understand
Kamala specifically, actually, more than with Biden, for example, right? Younger voters and black voters, especially, were expected to be the demographics that would sort of go for Kamala the hardest.
Why are they undecided? When we try to uncover that in the data we have, it's very clear that they're undecided because they believe the Biden administration was bad. They overwhelmingly disapprove of the Biden administration. So that's perhaps why they're undecided. If it weren't for some sort of identity anchor, if they weren't Latinos, if they weren't young, if they weren't black, and they were just disapproving of Biden, it would be much easier to just migrate to Trump. But because there is some sort of cultural or emotional attachment to their groups, to their identities, they're kind of reckoning between, can Kamala turn around a Biden administration that they think was not great, or should they rather go for Trump because they believe he could do a better job, but at the same time they don't like Trump because of his attributes, right? Because of why generally people within those same groups don't like Trump. So that's quite interesting. How this balance between, on the one hand, identities and demographic anchors on the one hand, and then on the other hand, these approval and disapproval rates of the current administration will play out. Now, it's very clear when we look at this comparison, Kamala versus Trump on the issues. Actually, even as we're talking about this huge boost for Harris compared to our last poll, Trump is doing much better now in terms of this analysis. So it does appear that a lot of what the dynamics is today is that people say, I like Kamala, but I'm not really trustful in that she will do a better job than Trump on these issues. Right. So when it comes to the economy, U.S. economy and job market, inflation, those things that we were seeing first on our previous graph, Trump is ahead here 14 points. 14 points on the economy, 14 points on inflation. When it comes to immigration, he's ahead 17 points.
Which is the strongest subject, right? I would point out, especially, I think what's really telling of this dynamic is the issue of reproductive rights, right? Abortion, which is, we can see here, the weakest for Trump, where only 44% think he's more trustworthy than Kamala Harris. But she is ahead of him there by only 2 points. So, within our margin of error. And so we can see there that are 11% that don't know, right? It's the highest rate here for all issues. And I think that really exemplifies how I think Trump is very well defined for the American electorate, right? He's been around for 8 years, and he's been the centerpiece of American politics since 2016. While people still are unsure about who Harris is, what she stands for,
or what she can deliver, maybe.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And so, even on a field with reproductive rights, like abortion, which has become a very high salience issue, and where Trump has repeatedly boasted about reversing Roe v. Wade, which we know is, from our poll, is a very unpopular thing to have done. People still haven't committed to Kamala and being like, oh, okay, she can, like you said, she can deliver, she can, bring back the protections that Roe instituted, for example. So I think this one really exemplifies why people still are sort of in doubt about Kamala, right?
I mean,
what can she do?
One of the main arguments that Kamala used during the debate is that should he be elected president, he would sign in a national abortion ban. In the debate, he kind of evaded giving a definitive answer on the topic.
And casually threw J.D. Vance under the bus.
But, given what he has said in the same answer, about how states, this is now back to the states and states decide. I mean, if states decide, you cannot have a national abortion ban. It's just incompatible with that. And that is his main line of defense when it comes to Roe versus Wade. It always comes to look, this was not about us imposing any sort of national abortion ban. It was about people within each state being able to decide what they want to do. And that is it appears to be a much more reasonable line of defense, considering the huge historical impact that this decision has had on the lives of so many young women in this situation. The human toll of this is considerable.
I would just make a little point there about that. That is, I think his response about that in the debate with Biden was more effective than the one in the debate with Kamala.
I thought so too. Because what was the difference? Did you sense?
I feel, first of all, he was already a bit rattled. He started off talking about Democrats executing babies, and Tim Walz wants to kill your babies, and then he got to the bit about states' rights. But when he was debating with Biden in June, he made it all about states' rights, how it's about states' rights to decide, and it's, that's how it should be. And I think against Kamala,
he attacked in a way that was less credible.
Yeah,
perhaps.
and he turned up the notch on sort of the conservatism, because he not only said it should be states' rights to decide, but he also heavily praised the Supreme Court justices that he put there. And he said, I put these guys there to do this, and they did it, and they're excellent justices, and they're very intelligent. And I think, as we can see also from our poll, we can see that Americans don't trust the Supreme Court a lot. So I think that was one of many examples during the debate of Trump saying something that would play very well to his conservative base, but which can maybe turn off some of the more undecided voters, and definitely Democrats, right? But, Democrats were not going to vote for Trump anyway.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the debate, it's quite interesting. So we're looking at polling numbers that tell us nothing has changed much in the race since last time. The most important thing that would have changed this was probably the debate. And when we look at what happened at the debate, among those that watched the debate, Kamala Harris came out as a winner. 47.6% say Kamala Harris won the debate. 39.1% say it was Trump. 13% aren't sure. Of course, it's clear that because of polarization, I don't think you could have numbers that would be much stronger for this, much stronger than this for Kamala, just because there will be some Republicans that will never say that Kamala won the debate, right? Because of what she represents, because of what her policies are, because of what she says, what she stands for. But it's pretty clear, within the polarization we have, these are good numbers for Kamala. Right?
Definitely.
She's 3 percentage points behind Trump at the national level in the popular vote, but she's 8 points ahead, or even more, in terms of people that say that she won the debate. It's pretty clear, right? What happened there?
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone saw that. Again, sort of like in June, the focus was on how Biden completely blew the debate, which of course he did. And I think now, I think Kamala did fine. I think she did great. I think she gave strong answers on abortion and on January 6th. And she very diplomatically avoided the tough questions.
There were many questions she didn't answer.
Yes, but
she avoided.
I think
but it was always very deft.
Yes, and she did that by staying on message, right? Pivoting again to I want to create an economy for the middle class. I want to fight for you. I want to turn the page on Trump, and he's the past, and I'm the future. I think these were sort of, maybe they're cliches. Maybe they're just, but she used them very well to sort of dodge the tougher questions that she had to.
I think better than the previous graph, better than that question in terms of understanding just by how much Kamala won the debate, because some people will never say that she won the debate. To get around this, we had a different approach to studying this question. So we asked voters to give both Trump and Kamala a grade. Using the U.S. system, A+ to F. And we have an average of all the grades that they received in the entire sample, and then by subgroups. What's interesting here is that, if you look at Republicans, they will give Trump a B+. That's not great. And they will give Kamala a C-. Those aren't actually, that far away. From a B+ to C-, there's some distance, but when you consider these are Republicans, they're pretty much saying we looked at the debate, and this was
passing grade,
and this was competitive between the two, right? When you look at Democrats, the difference is huge. A- for Kamala, D for Trump. And when you look at independents, it's a B- for Kamala and a C for Trump. So it's it's really quite clear here that, it's hard even when you're a Republican to say that Trump did great, and that is why within his base of support he only gets a B+, whereas Kamala gets an A-.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think it's very important here that among independents we can say that she performed well as well, because these are, if you have energized your base completely, now you're going after the independents and these people in the middle that can swing the election for you. So this is a pretty good result for her. And I would also point out that this gap, this big margin between Kamala and Trump among Democrats, it really exemplifies for me the sort of what has been the general tendency of Democrats after Biden dropped out, which is, okay, we're all rallying together to beat Trump now, and we'll figure everything else out after the election. But it's, it's Obama and Pelosi and AOC and Bernie Sanders and all the governors and everyone just coming together and go, okay, so it's going to be Kamala, we're going to do this. So, the Democrats are all steely-eyed on beating Trump, right? And so we'll solve all that else after the election.
The first consequence of this debate is that Trump has already stated today there'll be no third debate. He also claimed that this was the best debate he ever had. Well, but if it is true that there will be no further debate, that there will be no third debate, and if it is true that this debate didn't really, have any significant impact, that it didn't move the needle either way, that everything is stable. What do you think the strategies of the two candidates should be? I mean, if you're looking at this, if you're within Kamala Harris's campaign, and you're looking at what just happened, you have a candidate gave her best shot, won the debate, didn't really have an impact on the numbers. There will be no debate. There's no further debate. What do you think their strategy will be in terms of, trying to erode Trump's advantage going forward?
I think something that worked really well for her during the debate, and from our numbers, which put reproductive rights and right after that the state of democracy in the United States as sort of top concerns for the United States.
Basically, reinforce issue salience for those aspects that are not top of mind for voters today. But if they could maybe be made top of mind, that makes a lot of sense.
I think, and these are both subjects that can really contribute to the message that she has been trying to send, that she beat on a lot during the debate. That is, basically, I may be the vice president right now of this administration that you don't like, but I am actually the candidate of the future, right? I'm the candidate of change, and we are turning the page. Trump is the guy who tried to overthrow democracy on January 6th, and Trump is the guy that that revoked Roe v. Wade, and Trump is the guy that has, Project 2025. I think she would really want to throw that out there and be like, okay, so Trump is the reason that everything is wrong right now, and I'm the person who's going to change it. Her only shot is, in a situation where people are unsatisfied as they are now, is to make, it's a tough job, right? But it's to make herself the change candidate against Trump, who is,
or at least
the guy who is conservative and who wants to, try to
create some sort of angst or fear of what a return to Trump would mean for the country.
Yeah.
And focus on those aspects where he scores badly. Now, what do you think Trump can do or will do if this will be the strategy? And I feel that it's very likely it will, because there's no many other alternative strategies possible. So if it is true that the Democrats will hark on, the danger that Trump represents for democracy, and just what a bad guy he is, how does, we don't like Trump for this and that, and now there's J.D. Vance, right? So so there will be a deconstruction of the character of both, and I think Trump actually exposed himself to this by choosing J.D. Vance. Perhaps there would have been candidates that for VP that would have been safer picks than JD Vance for sure.
JD Vance is Democrats' dream choice for the best case scenario for Democrats is Trump picks JD Vance.
So what do you think
VP,
Trump's campaign will do to defend himself and resist?
I think they can discredit Kamala exactly because she is the incumbent. You know, she's not president, but you know, she's sitting right next to the president. She's the vice president. So I think the idea, and he almost got there during the debate.
Yeah, a little bit.
In his closing statement, but by then, you know, he had gone so all over the place that he couldn't drive that message home.
Part of a strategy, but he went off.
Yeah, exactly. I think he sort of got distracted and angry and veered off script. And then by the closing statement, he was like, oh, okay, in the closing statement, I know what I have to say, which is, why didn't you do it? You know, if you're promising all these great things for the future, you've been vice president for 3.5 years, you know, where are they, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's
it's a strong point.
Yeah, I mean, if he can, if his campaign can be disciplined about it and hammer on that point, and you know, stop, you know, doing spreading the conspiracies about abortions and immigrants eating people's pets and whatever the heck JD Vance is saying today. You know, focus on this, right? The practical thing, the pragmatic economic thing, which is you know, you are in a bad situation right now because the economy is terrible and the cost of living is up, and Kamala Harris has been in power for 3.5 years and she has done nothing to help you. So I'm the guy who's going to change that. I think that's if I were Trump's campaign manager, I'm going to be, you know, stop talking about Project 2025 and whatever the hell we're talking about, and let's focus on the economy, even more than immigration. Because I feel like the immigration, while it's a very powerful subject, it can also, you know, lead to talking about immigrants eating people's pets, and then suddenly you're the radical again, and you're the crazy guy who's talking about things no one understands.
Pedro, we have all sorts of, you know, quantitative models looking at probabilities who will win based on poll aggregations. You know, there's the 538 model. There is the Nate Silver model. No, they're different. They're not one and the same thing anymore. What is your qualitative sense, you know, hunch, and sort of instinct? Not so much looking at our poll number today that shows Trump ahead, but you know, your intuition. What chances would you give each candidate today?
I would say my intuition was that we would see, like I said at the top of the podcast, I was thinking we would see the polls at least narrow a little bit during this month with the enthusiasm for Kamala and how things have been going for her. And I think I'm going to still say that. I'm going to say that it's maybe a 60-40 chance for Kamala to win. But I will be looking at polls in the next week and the next 2 weeks to sort of calibrate that prediction, because if after this debate, which she did so well and which everyone agrees that she won, you know, even the Republicans are like, oh, okay, they were not so far apart, that I think for the next week she'll get some really positive coverage and she has the opportunity to get some momentum going. If in like 2-3 weeks we do another poll and she's still stuck where she is right now, I would feel that I have to sort of recalibrate this prediction.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I'm very much oriented by the numbers we have. And I believe in those numbers. And if I believe in those numbers and I think about how this plays out, you know, swing state by swing state, and that is something that we'll be releasing next week, I would give Trump 70% chance of winning and Kamala 30%. That means that, you know, Kamala still has a chance, but I wouldn't call this race that narrow at this point in time based on this built-in advantage that Trump has.
That's fair. No, you were a few maybe 2 weeks ago, you told me you were 60-40 for Trump. Was it our poll right now that changed that perception and made you give, like, after all that,
after all
it's
of
still
this
the
momentum,
same, so
you know, you have huge momentum. You have all the media, covering Kamala in a very positive light because she's been doing a great job. You have Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala. What more? I mean, at the end of the day, you kind of ask yourself, what more could you do, or could she do, or could her campaign do to reverse the advantage that Trump has nationally? And I don't really see it at this point. I mean, if it's stable to this degree, and Trump still has a margin, even if it's small, but he has a margin at the national level, within the best context possible for Kamala. How is she going to erode this going forward? That's kind of my intuition, the way I'm analyzing it here. But I'm also sensitive to your to your perception, and I think that one reality about U.S. politics today, and is that it's become extremely fast and volatile, and people forget fast about things, and they're sort of triggered by new events all the time. The fact that we're not talking about the assassination attempt, the fact that we're not talking about Robert F. Kennedy, the fact that we're not talking about Biden and how he dropped out.
We're not even talking about J.D. Vance anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even talking about J.D. Vance anymore. And last week it appeared to be huge. So, that also means that perhaps the 70-30 I just gave is a bit too aggressive, because, many things change really fast. Yeah, and who knows what the driver of the vote will be when election day comes.
We even have the term for October surprise, right? So
yeah,
we're still halfway through September. There's still a lot of things that could come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, my friends, our time is up. Thank you very much, Pedro.
Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
To everyone that has been watching this, and we will be looking forward to a new edition of Atlas Deep Dive US with our latest polling number, and soon you will also be seeing our release on the swing states. State by state, we will be telling you who we believe is ahead. So stay tuned.